GM, welcome to another episode of Web3 Academy, your trusted source for useful and legitimate information to remain on the forefront of the internet revolution. I'm Jay Bird, and this is Kyle Reedhead, and we believe that Web3 is going to change the world. That's why we're here to guide the world's top talent into this space to contribute, get ahead of the curve, and capitalize on the opportunity. Today, we're capitalizing on growth marketing in Web3 with TPan and the X to Mint formula. Kai, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, another great episode, and I think we brought on some top talent, right? That's exactly what TPan is in the growth world. He just brings a different perspective that a lot of people aren't necessarily writing about or speaking about with his idea of the sort of X to Mint, which I think is a fairly simple concept to understand, but a very useful one for really any business that's looking to either onboard new members into Web3 or just create experiences for existing members that are in Web3. So it's a really cool model that TPan broke down, and he's a great brain in the space. And it's nice to bring on, and we kind of talk about it. We could probably talk for hours and hours about Web3 because all three of us are in marketing, but also all three of us are deep down the rabbit hole of Web3. So always great to bring on others who are that far down the rabbit hole.
Totally. Yeah. TPan brings a wealth of knowledge because he's been writing almost 5 times a week. More recently, I think to start this year, he's only doing it twice a week now, but he was writing 5 times a week for all of 2022, his newsletter. So he's got just such a wealth of knowledge. It's so helpful. And he comes also from a background of growth marketing in Web2. He worked in ed tech and fintech and ride sharing. And so what I love most about TPan is that he came because there was an opportunity to make money, NBA Top Shots in particular, which he will say he did not end up making the amount of money that he thought he was going to make in the beginning. But he realized he stayed for everything else because he realized that the financial opportunities is not the most important use case of Web3, and it's also not the most approachable, and that there's so much else here in this space that businesses can use and learn from. And so we really dive into more interesting use cases than just when token go up.
You know what? Most people come into this space for the financial opportunity, but I think what they don't understand is the financial opportunity is not just trying to invest and trade your way through tokens. It's by coming into the space, building a network, building a business, gaining a new skill, and being ahead of the adoption of technology. And that's how you really make money in this space. I don't know if people understand that yet, but I think TPan has, and hopefully our listeners, all of you have as well, because we do talk about that all the time. But we'll give you some great skills, great insight here in this episode. Before we get into it, though, let's take a quick second and hear from our sponsors.
The future of social media is here, and that future lives in Web3 on top of Lens protocol. Web2 social platforms are broken and ripe for disruption. You see, the epicenter of social media is the creators, and yet they are the most neglected. Web2 platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all essentially robbing creators of their worth. Creators are a new type of entrepreneur, forming new types of businesses. Yet with Web2 platforms, creators don't own their content or their profiles, and that's their product and business. Instead, they are tied to the platforms they choose to create on. Well, just like how crypto is freeing us from banks, Web3 is freeing us from these centralized platforms. On Lens protocol, creators own their content, own their profile, and even their social graph and followers in the form of NFTs. This allows you to move freely from one social application to another with your content, profile, and followers moving along with you. Lens protocol enables self-sovereignty for your social graph and interoperability across the internet. At Web3 Academy, we believe this is the future of social, and that's why we've partnered with Lens to ensure that the path of social media is heading in the right direction. Visit lens.xyz to learn more today.
Shared ownership is revolutionizing the way we think of digital ownership. Did you know that you can benefit from the utility of a Bored Ape Yacht Club, CryptoPunk, or Azuki without actually spending tens of thousands of dollars to buy it? How? By buying an access key to the asset. You see, with Segment, you can now buy and hold parts of an expensive NFT and share in its ownership and utility, like airdrops or exclusive access. As an owner of a high-profile NFT, you can distribute ownership with access keys and create liquidity for yourself. It's a win-win situation. Plus, the ownership and transfer of these keys are managed on-chain, which ensures transparency and security. Now, we want the Web3 Academy community to be on the forefront of this new wave of NFT utility, which is why we've partnered with Segment, a non-custodial NFT platform set to launch in Q3 of this year. Segment aims to allow users to easily create access keys and share ownership of NFTs with other friends and community members. The team is going through their beta release soon and has opened up their waitlist for Web3 Academy listeners. If you want to stay on the forefront of Web3, sign up for for Segment's waitlist today with the link in the show notes below. Shared ownership is a game changer, and we want you to be there first.
TPan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, GM. Thank you both for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to share some observation, thoughts, and here to have a good time hanging out with y'all.
Feel the exact same. So let's start off. TPan, how did you first fall down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, always a fun story to rehash and think about. I definitely have a lot of parallels to probably other guests and individuals in the space joining Web3. And at the same time, a little different. So I'll start with my background. Professionally, I started off doing growth marketing, growth-related roles in tech, particularly Web2 tech, and marketing-related roles. Started off in mobile gaming, then rideshare space. I'm based out here in the Bay Area, so a lot of different tech companies. Then went to a variety of different industries holding these roles in health tech, fintech, entertainment tech, and most recently, edutech. And in my most recent full-time job, it was during COVID, spent a lot more time at home, no surprise there, spent a lot more time online. And as a result, I think through the grapevine of different conversations I had and just poking around different areas of the internet, came across NBA Top Shot, the classic digital trading cards on the blockchain, thanks to Dapper Labs. And they're definitely, very well respected and legends in the space in regards to what they've done and also where they've come from and how they've contributed to the space. And for me, I thought it was a light bulb moment, just the ability to get closer and the ability to digitally trade on the blockchain, these digital collectibles, these trading cards of LeBron James, Steph Curry, all these basketball players, which is clear to me. I saw a future where you could be at your local team's basketball game at the arena and you just get airdropped this 1 of 1,000 special Top Shot, right? And that was just so visceral to me. Combining that with my background in growth and marketing, I just saw that click. I went super hard. I am a stereotypical diamond hander for better and worse. That has treated me well, and that has also been very painful. You can still talking about Top Shot. I'll just put it that way. I definitely have a lot less than I used to. Fun fact, I was a strong believer, and they hinted at this in different degrees. Again, it's nothing on them, but I thought they were going to create for NBA Top Shot. They're doing this for some of their other products, an unopened packs marketplace. So I actually held like 150 unopened packs, like the rarest ones, like the legendary ones to the most basic ones. I got in at the early days of Series 2, so I won't get into details, but let's just say it took a very, 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 very long time to open up all the packs. It was over 500 moments, list them, and as the prices drop down, delist, relist, delist, relist, and now it's much more manageable. So I have a piece I wrote about that just in regards to some of the slight, pain points. I think most people don't interact that way, but you make decisions and sometimes they don't work out, and many times, in other scenarios they do. But what brought me in, as you can sort of tell, was sort of seeing number go up from a financial standpoint. And I got curious and I joined the space. But it quickly became clear to me that I wanted to stay for a lot of other reasons, right? And the easy way to describe it, and many of these are all buzzwords, but I have my own 3C framework I created. And the 3 Cs are basically community, creators, and culture. And I think this sort of paradigm or this new chapter in Web3 applications, finance, Bitcoin, that is always going to be sort of the OG use case and arguably the most important. But now this sort of new wave of applications from a creator lens, from a community lens, from a cultural lens is what sort of stood out to me. And it turned from why number go up to why is there just so much energy outside of just numbers and quantitatively interest pouring into the space. So that's what continued to draw me in like a magnet. Started to become an early community member of some other NFT focused communities that are definitely still around. So that's really great to sort of see them grow throughout. And that sort of led me to the broader Web3 space. Obviously, digital collectibles, consumer facing brands is one thing. There's so much else going on, whether it's on the DeFi side, infra side. And again, with my background, it got to a point where I just started noticing some really interesting stuff, from a marketing and growth standpoint. And all my non-sleeping, all my non-waking hours were sort of just on Twitter, on Discord, getting into Telegram and doing a lot, definitely a lot more DMs on the Telegram side nowadays too. And like you mentioned, a little different than some folks, but I just decided to dive in. And what that meant for me was not necessarily building a product or finding a full-time job immediately. It was just leaving my full-time job, very, grateful for that situation, love the company I came from and still love them today. But I decided to leave full stop and just wanted to do two things. The first one, much more standard, meet as many people as possible in this space, connecting with great folks like yourselves, plenty of other folks, founders, builders, marketers in the space. And the second thing, which is definitely more interesting, was to actually just write. I've actually wanted to write for probably several years now. I have no formal writing background outside of just doing Dear Diary journal entries since a young age. I started journaling on and off since I was about 6-7 years old. I have those notebooks right under my desk here. I've shared a snapshot or a screenshot in one of my earlier pieces, I think maybe a month or two ago. Super stupid. It's just like, oh, I'm mad at my mom today. Like, we went to McDonald's. Like, now I'm super happy.
They're great to look back on, though. So good to look back on and reflect and understand who you were and kind of how you used to think compared to now. I love doing it.
Yeah, definitely, a little more advanced today, but I think it just helped me. And I think it helped me realize that I'm an overthinker, right? And stereotypically, it feels like overthinkers are good writers because it's a great way to put pen on paper, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for the public, just to share your thoughts, share your thinking, share your logic. And I just didn't find the right topic to write about. I've been itching for that. And I realized Web3, with my sort of background and lens of growth and marketing, was where I wanted to write, where I could sort of still infuse my personal voice, my opinions, even a little bit of what's going on with me personally, where I've been, what I'm up to, but also have a very strong topic where there's a never ending, and you guys know this, a never-ending supply of topics, news, headlines, takes, opinions, just known unknowns and conversations to be had. And that's where I really started. It was more for myself to a large degree, but also just sharing my thoughts. And I had some hypotheses about what I wanted to write about, how I wanted to write about it. And here we are about 10 months later. Definitely the publication has grown a fair degree. It's been fun doing collabs with you guys, for example. You guys have a great newsletter yourselves. I mean, a great brand you're building, but also just that leading, of course, no, and I really mean that, blow smoke in that regard. I definitely have a high bar for all of us that are sort of in the marketing and growth space, as well as myself in regards to the content that I write and making sure I'm thoughtful about it. And we just need more of these pillars of education and sort of illumination in regards to, again, going back to my background, because it's very, very important to me. That has led to, and maybe we could talk about a little bit more, or we could jump to other topics. But as a growth person, I think one of the most important things is, understanding where the action is, right? And what I mean by that is not necessarily what are the headlines, right? Today is February 21st. This will be published at a later date, but what everyone's talking about is the Blur OpenSea sort of
the war
activity, right? The war. People call it
activity is way too nice. It's a war.
And the reason why I call it that is because I think there's a lot more under the hood, and I probably won't, because so many people are talking about it. I prefer to talk about the things that, people have not turned over those stones yet, right? And we'll get into some of those topics. But I think from a growth lens, if you're trying to understand how you sort of 10x your product, it's important to understand what the sort of headlines are of the day, Blur OpenSea as an example, but what are the things people are not talking about? What are, for example, the DGens doing? And if you actually think about it from whether it's a top-down or bottoms-up approach, it gets very interesting in terms of where you think about sources of inspiration, or where you think about what are the small folks doing, and what are some interesting things that they're doing that you might actually apply to your own big brand, your big project, the conversations you're having, because there's a lot of activity and exciting inspiration from there too. So really going high, going low, and going in between. And that's what I like to do in regards to my writing.
It's a great transition into the growth focus that you have on Web3, which is really why we wanted to bring you on the show today, because you do have, right back at you, incredible newsletter, great writer, so impressed with all the stuff you've been producing, TPan. But what's so unique about you is you're one of the few that's writing it from that growth lens. Actually, you know what? I just want to take a pause because I do want to give a shout out to anybody who leaves a paying job to create content. Amen to you. Like, that is a big risk that is very hard to do. Kai, you might have an opinion too, because I know you feel so strongly about that. It's a big risk, and your family might think you're crazy. TPan, I don't know what your family said about you when you made the leap, but the value that you can get from just committing to, whether it's writing or it's video or it's audio, whatever your content medium is, the learnings that come from that. So not just TPan, not just buying NBA Top Shots and not just being active in the space, but then also writing and taking it to the next step of what's this framework and what's this concept and how do I think about this and how do I explain it to somebody else is really a huge value that levels you up in ways you would never imagine, I think.
It's the best way to learn. And I also think, I love that you said you wanted to focus on two things. One is writing, the other was networking. And I think in Web3, there's no better time to be networking than right now, because in 5 years from now, it's going to be very difficult to network in this place. Right now, you can go and talk to any founder of any company. They're just like, yeah, sure, I'll talk to whoever. When you try to talk to the founder of any Web2 company, that's not happening, you know? It is the perfect time to just go all in and do it. So I love it.
Yeah, appreciate it. I appreciate the shout out. And Jay, to answer your question in regards to why my parents thought about it, I'll just say once I started entering, like, my background from a growth and marketing standpoint was growth marketing, performance marketing, right? It was also in mobile gaming back in like almost 10 years ago, like 9 years ago, right? So when I tried to explain to my parents, who are also immigrants for like 30 years ago coming to the US from Asia, it was pretty limited in regards to what were the most, understandably so, right? Like what was a reliable, stable sort of career. And I, once I went to do growth marketing, which is a very new sort of discipline in a sort of industry, mobile gaming specifically, not just gaming, that was just starting off a few years old, it was already like extremely hard to explain what I did. So ever since that point, like almost 10 years ago, just being like, hey, I'm doing this. Oh, I moved to this company. I'm doing similar work. Now I'm doing slightly different work, but more of a leadership level at this company, that is in edutech, but is actually a dance-focused company. They're like, what? So once I entered here and, hey, we're adults, there's this level of trust and also just you're talking about this with this level of passion we haven't heard about before too. And I can tell myself, like, I could talk about this stuff for hours. If I meet someone randomly at the bar or bump into someone at some event, and you guys could probably do the same, right? If we saw each other in real life, we're like, I only got 10 minutes to chat, like, let's chat, and it ends up being 30 minutes, like, oh, let me cancel my meeting, right? Like, that definitely happens in the space when game recognize game, if you know, you know.
Or you're at a dinner party and you're that.
You go into the corner, right? It's like,
wants to talk to.
Yeah, and like, you find your tribe, like, you find that one other person at the party, and then, like, your fiancés or partners or whatever. Yeah. My fiancé would just roll her eyes, but, like, low-key happy that, like, I found someone at this party that we're just chatting for the rest of the night. And like everyone else is intimidated because they're like, okay, they're not just having a casual conversation. I am not going to approach them, right? But like, we're just having a blast. So it's a little bit of that. And like, there definitely is trust and consulting, advising on the side too. But, long term, we'll see where that really takes me. And it's really exciting. But starting off on the foot, that is just not common. And I think, when we talk about content, you guys are doing a great job. And this is the last bit about content, I think is also sort of underappreciated, especially with good content. Again, I don't say it lightly. I think you guys are creating great content here in the space and very important, is it's a public good, right? And what we mean by public goods, don't need to go down that rabbit hole, a lot of different ways to think about it. But in Web3, there's that big concept, right? If you open source code, if you provide and create tools, like Dune Analytics is a public good in a lot of senses, but content is a public good too. So from your guys' angle, from my angle, how can we create public goods that still benefit us? Don't get me wrong. And that's important because there needs to be some level of compensation, even if it's not purely just financial. But having the work that we're doing be approached as public goods and resources that whether you're a newbie, especially if the content is for newbies, to experts, or for me as an example, growth-specific case studies, frameworks, and examples of what's going on in the space, that a lot of interesting people, new, old, Web2 going into Web3, or other builders and founders are looking for these types of resources. That's very underappreciated, but also very important to highlight. So, for all the content creators listening in, or even if you're thinking about creating content for your business, how can you do it in a way that obviously benefits you and what you're doing? No doubt, if you're getting zero credit or you're not getting what you need from that, that's important. But really approaching it in a way where you can truly provide value for others. And if you lead with that, there's something there, right? So I think that's very important to highlight and double down on when you do find some of that magic.
It's really the most simple frame of mind for any new business is just provide value, and you don't know where to lead. And as a creator, you often don't know where to lead. So yeah, anybody out there, provide value and it'll go to great places. Okay, let's transition into Web3 growth mechanics. So you've spent the last 10 months, as you said, TPan. I think you were writing 5 times per week in the beginning. Now I think you've scaled it back a bit because that's crazy. 5 times per week. Mm-hmm. Now I think you're at 2 times per week? Anyways, you've been
3 times a week. Yep.
Full on for 10 months. Give us just an overview of why you decided to focus on growth mechanics, and I should say why you decided to focus on growth, and maybe I want to lead into the X to Mint formula. But before we talk specifically about that formula, I want to just take an overview of growth in the Web3 space, and maybe even you can lead that back to your past experience in marketing growth.
Yeah. So I'll start with a little bit of that context and then leading to why I write about growth in the Web3 space. And then, we could talk about the X to Mint formula, which has been more of a recent sort of theme in my writing because I'm starting to see a lot more of those mechanics happening, which is cool and really great for the rest of the space to better understand what's going on there. But as I've shared it with my background in growth and marketing, I think specifically with growth, in my opinion, one of the skill sets, this doesn't have to be for every growth professional because I think there's a lot of different types of growth professionals. Some are more analytical, some are great people leaders, some are great strategists, some are really good hands-on, whether they're senior, junior, doesn't matter, and just like focusing on execution. What I've learned is, I could do all the above too as a growth individual, working in that space, but also as a leader. But what I realized over the years that I'm really good at was observing, pointing out the observations and explaining those observations in a way that makes sense. And in a lot of cross-functional collaborative work that I did when I was at full-time in various companies, that was where I delivered the most magic. Explaining those complex growth concepts to all these different people, whether you're in data science, whether you're on the creative side, whether you're in content, whether you're a business executive to someone on my team who is more junior, right? And seeing that light bulb click. So when it translated over to creating content, I realized, one, as I've observed the space during my sort of early days, and for the record, I actually was lurking in Twitter and Discord. I didn't do anything. I didn't publicly tweet. I didn't write for 15 months, right? So that sort of led to me writing 5 times a week because I just had this waterfall of just pent up sort of content topics that actually allowed me to very naturally. And again, writing isn't for everyone. Like everyone has their own medium. Some people could just do everything. Some people are just really good at one thing. And my home base is writing long form, right? I'm definitely doing more Twitter threads and stuff like that. I gotta do it. That's part of the game.
That's the Web2 growth playbook, right? Threads.
Yeah, and I fully understand. I've said this so many times, maybe less publicly. For the record, it's ironic that I'm not focusing on the number of subscribers and followers, but rather focusing on some degree of the creative and artistic side of writing, as well as bringing my sort of flavor and expertise in. And that sort of led to a different type of growth sort of trajectory that is now starting to take off. But it's not like you see that type of growth early in the first couple of months, right? Not even to mention the first 6 months. But, as I was thinking about what I'm good at, what I enjoyed, and the topic I wanted to write about, which is the Web3 space, very broad, and then bringing in my skill sets and my unique point of view, I knew I was not going to start writing about headlines, right? Because that is somewhat saturated. It still is saturated today. Not saying you can't be successful there, right? There's different ways to achieve that success. It's a different type of game you need to play there, so to say. But I realized that, one, there was a lack of growth-related content out there. 2, I really enjoy that. 3, I have my own personal moat because I have a background that many other folks don't have, and we need a lot more growth people in the Web3 space, thoughtful ones in particular. Thoughtful everyone in this space, to be more specific. And I wanted to test out the hypothesis, right? Who is actually starting to read the content? Who is sharing and to whom? And, who is actually consistently reading that content? So I started taking various data points in my hypotheses. I want to write about Web3. I want to do long form via Substack. And I also want to write more specifically about Web3 growth and marketing case studies, frameworks, things I'm pointing out that other people aren't. And I started seeing signs qualitatively and a little more delayed quantitatively showing me that there is a need and a want and a hunger for that content, and that I could deliver that value to them. And now I'm seeing that manifested in other ways. And I know, for example, you guys are measuring and tracking in different ways too, qualitatively, quantitatively. So that's how I got into growth. So like my background, testing the hypotheses and seeing that feedback loop, that's sort of letting me know and letting the space know we need more of this type of content.
Yeah. And I love that you said you are very good at seeing something and then turning it into a concept or a model that is easy to understand. So giving it a name and then explaining it to others. And so that's a perfect lead in. Let's talk about the Extimint formula. What's the Extimint formula?
I think I'll start off with just the concept of minting. And for probably most of the listeners in the space, we understand what minting is. Basically creating and sort of having an asset, whether it's NFT or something else, on the blockchain, right? I'm intentionally making it very simple, probably technically inaccurate. So don't quote me. I'm not pretending like I'm, super technically accurate with a lot of my concepts, because comprehensibility is very important, right? So trading off a little bit of that accuracy for the comprehensibility for a larger audience is important here. As it stands today, typically what you do to mint something, easiest example is NFTs, you click a few buttons, you connect your wallet, and actually what happens is when you click mint, and it probably costs something at minimum gas, you actually are interacting, your wallet is interacting, and by extension, you are interacting with a smart contract, and you are using the mint function. And by doing that, you create, let's say, this new NFT on the blockchain. Great, that's yours forever until you decide to do something else with it. I don't know what percentage, but let's just say 99 or more than 99% of minting interactions function in this way. Few mouse clicks, boom, you have the thing. And what happens there is you have this model, you have this formula, and let's call it X to mint. In this case, it's click to mint, interact to mint. What we're starting to see is other models here. And why I'm saying X to mint is if you treat that input as a variable, you actually can do other things in order to mint, let's say, an NFT. And there's a lot of examples over the past weeks and months, and there have been many others in the past, don't get me wrong, but I think it's happening more en masse. And I think it's becoming very clear to individuals like myself that are observing a trend happening where you can do other things.
Can you give us an example of a X to Y formula from Web2 or from previous marketing growth tactics?
Yeah, definitely. So one that came to mind when I wanted to explain X to Y specifically was actually from my childhood. It's a program from, the cereal industry called Box Tops for Education. So to explain the TLDR of what's going on there, and has evolved over time, is back in the day, let's say a few decades ago, on the top of every cereal box, or at least I think General Mills, there was this little sort of cutout where you can cut out a portion of the cereal box, and there's this little Box Tops for Education. I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you cut out each one of those, General Mills or the cereal company would donate 5 cents or maybe 25 cents to educational initiatives and nonprofit organizations to push education, which is super important. So if we were to use that X to Y formula, what you were doing is you were cutting to donate, right? Bear with me, right? That sounds a little crazy, but that actually sort of fits that formula, right? You're doing something to get an outcome, and it feels good. You're basically donating by cutting up a portion of a box that you already bought to eat cereal with, right? So what does the 2023 version of that look like today? First of all, Box Tops for Education still exists today, right? You aren't cutting the box anymore, right? We're in sort of the modern era, right? Much more digital. But what you do is you scan the barcode now. But the outcome is the same. When you scan the barcode, you download an app or you submit it, that gets counted on the cereal company's side, and then they donate it. So that's a win all around. That's a win for the nonprofits. That's a win for the cereal company, right? They're doing good stuff. And that's a win for the consumer because they're feeling good. They're giving back. That is scan to donate. So we just talked about, let's say, cut and like mail to donate, let's say. Now it's scan to donate. So if you sort of port that over, instead of donating, you're minting, And then there's a lot more examples.
And let's dive into the other examples, because I know we want to talk about play to mint, scan to mint, text to mint, speak to mint, and maybe burn to bid as well. But where this goes is, what is growth? Growth is all about, can you grab attention? And in order to grab attention, you need to have fun, engaging, informative. You need to give value, as you said before. And just clicking isn't grabbing attention all the time. Also, clicking right now in Web3 is a very challenging UX, and it's dangerous. So, so there's also that side of it too. But I think a lot of these examples, the reason this formula that you're coming up with is so effective is because we are in an attention economy, and these things grab attention.
Before we get into, I just want to add one thing. You said, Jay, like this wasn't really possible in Web 2, and like it is possible in Web 2. You can scan to do anything in Web 2 and click to do anything in Web 2. The difference here and why minting is so important is that the thing you get, like you guys said, you own it, which means that whatever you scanned or clicked or whatever to then get, you can now take it and have experiences outside of just the company that you're, just the website or the account or whatever it is that you got it on. In the Web 2 world, you're stuck, right? Air miles or something. I earn my air miles. I can only use it there with air miles. In Web 3, the thing that I'm minting is what goes here. You own this thing, and now you can go interact with anything. And I can create experiences on any metaverse or on any website or on any whatever I want. That's the beauty of minting rather than, I don't know what we called it in Web 2, but whatever that was. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up.
Kyle, I think that's actually a great point, because I want to go back to the box tops piece, right? And I think one of the things you're alluding to is like better understanding your customer. I'm not saying in a creepy, meta or like purely, we want to send you more ads way. And like, hey, that's inevitable to a degree, that'll come, but we're not there yet, fortunately. And like, hopefully there's more and more thoughtfulness put into that. But like, let's talk about like in the 90s or the early 2000s, box tops. Let's go back there. What happens? You mail the box tops, and then, General Mills, as an example, knows that, okay, there's someone that is like not only buying our cereal boxes, or like maybe they're just going through the dumpster and like, cutting up these boxes, but like, we know that they're a consumer, very likely, right? Maybe we can mail them coupons if we want, or like show them our things. That's more or less it. And their physical address.
We have their address.
Then what does it look like now if you scan? Okay, well, we probably know their email. You can better understand the frequency. You could see, okay, well, this barcode actually means that this is Cheerios, right? They just eat like 10 boxes of Cheerios a week. Like, I don't know if they have like 100 kids or something, but like, they eat a lot of Cheerios, right? And then you could start like better understanding your consumer, build a deeper relationship that way, right? Like clearly they care about donating. Clearly they really like Cheerios. And clearly they are die-hard supporters of this Box Tops nonprofit initiative. That's awesome, right? So what does it look like if you have a stronger interactive model, but also one where you could better understand your consumer? You're breaking those barriers. You could see, okay, well, they're actually doing not only do they like the General Mills NFT, but they like all cereal NFTs. Like, what does that mean? They're just scouring the internet and like Web3, and they really like that. Oh, they're really big like consumer goods fans. That's actually what it is. It's not just cereal. I'll stop myself from going down that rabbit hole, but I think, Kyle, that's also what you're alluding to, right? There's a much richer sort of extra dimension added to that relationship, right? Not just data, that too, but also the relationship with the consumer. So, all right, where were we?
Let's do play to mint. So we got play to mint, scan to mint, text to mint, speak to mint. Let's do one at a time.
So with the formula, we're sticking with mint for now, but I think that hopefully enriches the formula, in which eventually we could probably talk about in a bit. It's more than potentially just minting, but in this case, with the formula, we're going to talk about X to mint, right? So starting with play to mint, a very great recent example of this is Dookie Dash by Yuga Labs, Bored Ape Yacht Club. They just recently, over the past couple of weeks, closed the sort of mini game that they had, Dookie Dash, and also announced the official winners of it. Super cool. Pro gamer, won it all. Pretty crazy. I think this is really interesting, right? Again, like sort of just my sort of growth mind and also poking into details. What they positioned this as very consistently was they called it a skill-based mint. What I found interesting, and probably intentionally so, was the Web3 audience they were catering to and their holders understood it was play to mint. It was a game. And in order to, by playing the game, then you were eligible for the next phase of their big sort of activation, for lack of a better word. But if we were to abstract that just a little bit. It's basically play to mint. You need to play the game in order to mint that next phase of this campaign. You couldn't just hold a sewer pass, right? That's very important to take note of. You had to actually interact with what was going on. If you had 0, like 1 point, let's say, or 1 million points, it doesn't matter. You needed to play to mint. And they were being more specific. Based on your score, that impacted the outcome of the mint, which is why they honed in on that a little bit. But that's very interesting, right? How many off the top of our heads? I think it's somewhat limited right now. I think in the next year, in the coming years, and even months, we're going to see a lot more of this. But this is an example of play to mint, right?
Well,
very rudimentary.
They could have, which they had done so far, their playbook was just airdrop, right?
Yep.
So, and they did airdrop the sewer pass to Bored Ape Yacht Club holders within Kennel Club, Mutiny Ape Yacht Club, Bored Ape Yacht Club, depending upon what you had, you got a different tier of a sewer pass. They could have just airdropped it and been done. So why not do that? Well, that doesn't grab attention. That doesn't amplify content. That doesn't get new people talking about you in the same way. Whereas in this case, they created this game. Did you get a sewer pass, TPan? Neither Kyle or I did. So we speculate on when it was like to play the game.
Yeah. So I got one. Let's just say I was focused on profit taking. So I just sold it. And I sold it early. I'll just stop there, right? Yeah, sure.
That's the one caveat of this play to mint. It was actually technically buy to play to mint, right? Like no one could just actually play to mint.
Yeah.
Whereas I think where this goes more mainstream, and the reason that you play is because it creates an experience. So you get familiar with the brand. You're actually creating experience for these people to mint whatever the heck the thing is. But if it's free to play to mint, here's now a no barrier entry point into someone interacting with your brand and your business. And maybe it's a education type of play, or there's Stepin, which did like a a walk to mint kind of thing, which is still play to mint technically, but it's actually something healthy. So it's like it's creating an experience and then mint it rather than just airdropping, like you said, which I think is great. It's just, Yuga Labs made you buy it. I don't know how much that thing cost, but it wasn't cheap.
Yeah, I don't know what it is today, but I think before the game closed at its peak, it was about 2 to 2.5 ETH. So maybe around $4,000 at the time before it closed, and there were fluctuations throughout, scores that were deemed cheating, had a score of 0, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely a lot of interesting action on that front. And Kyle, you just mentioned walk to mint, right? With step in or walk to earn, play to earn, right? That's another example of that formula where the sort of second variable is earn. And I know there's some hesitancy these days about, anything to earn, but it's important to understand that sort of framework and model exists. And that's another example. And I think earning is fine, but of course, there's going to be a lot more robust mechanics in the future in regards to what that really means. Or they're changing it to play and earn, right? That's not necessarily always the end goal. Sometimes it's a wording thing, right? So with Dookie Dash and Yuga Labs and what they've done, Play to Mint is a great example of a very large, prominent one where they're sort of changing some aspects of what it means to actually mint. But you really need to participate in their way to participate in the next step.
And you come into their story, which I think gets you more involved because then you're more interested, which is why playing is good. The challenge with play to mint, if you're a business and you're looking at this and thinking, should I do play to mint? That's a heavier lift. Let's go to the next one, scan to mint, which is probably the easiest and the lightest lift for a business to do.
And we already talked about scanning as an action with the Box Tops example, and very relevant to this space today. And one very prominent example, one that's much lesser known example, I've written about both, was planning to write both in one piece, but the first one just took so much time and space, and I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. So it was, what I called it was a tale of two QR codes, right? And in short, you're scanning these QR codes. So the first one is with Limit Break and Digidaigaku. For anyone that, is more up to date on all the happenings during the Super Bowl, the company Limit Break, they are a Web3 gaming company. They've raised over $200 million in venture capital funding. The founders and many people at the company, they come from the mobile gaming space. So I'm aware of sort of a little bit more of the background of the team, particularly the founder. They did a scan to mint Super Bowl ad that cost $6.5 million objectively and overall terrible ad. I won't get into the details.
Awful.
You could Google it. You could
Kyle, what did you think about the ad?
Not even going to say it again. Not even going to go on that rant.
Yeah, you're not going to go on that rant? Okay, well, there's plenty more from where that came from if you just Google or go on Twitter. So no shortage there. But what I wanted to highlight out was the scanning, right? You had to scan that QR code, and basically after a couple minutes, or, for some people even sooner, like that was gone. It just led you to the CEO's Twitter page. Other thoughts about that? Cool, we won't get into it. But the point is, it was scanned to mint on the biggest live TV stage in the US. And that's pretty notable in regards to just people understanding that you can scan something on TV. And to be clear, this was for an NFT or Web3 related effort, but there were actually multiple other commercials that had QR codes too. So scanning, first of all, is an action that's becoming much more commonplace. Bus stop ads, on traffic posts, right? You just see other things where you just scan the thing if you want to, contact whoever it is posting on that post, to TV ads, like what we're seeing today, much more commonplace. So in this case, it's scanned to mint on the biggest live TV stage in the US, the Super Bowl. And I think for certain, in a lot of aspects for Limit Break, that was a success, because one of their goals was to stress test, like, what if there were hundreds of thousands, or maybe potentially, who knows what the real number is, millions of people trying to scan that thing at the same time. And, from what we can tell, like, their systems and their backend held up. So that's actually very interesting. And what's applicable for other folks is understanding, one, does this even work? Two, we'll see if Limit Break does this, and this is one of the arguments I make in the piece, but with a QR code, what if you just change the QR code and do a TV campaign across different shows, across different countries, late night TV versus, during the daytime soap operas? Like, how can you, again, in terms of better understand your consumer, see who scans? When do they scan? Do they create a wallet because of it? Do they already have an existing wallet, etc.? How do they create a campaign that sort of maybe sticks or becomes much more than, let's say, what a lot of people think, $6.5 million sort of burnt in the corner of the room?
The thing that I didn't really get about the ad is, like, you said they stress test, and yes, what they didn't need to stress test as a QR code work. We already know that works with millions. Coinbase did it last year, and actually a bunch did it in the Super Bowl last year, right? So it's like, that's just a Web2 tech. That's easy. It works. Yep. There was I don't think they had any concern that scanning was going to be a problem. It's if 100 million people scanned and wanted to mint something, that's the thing we need to stress test, because that's the big problem.
Exactly.
They didn't end up stress testing that because they rugged everyone and tweeted about it before the ad went live. So, like, I don't even know that they got to stress test that, but that would have been nice if it was like an open mint for anyone, and instead of only minting like 4,000 or something at that time. If they would just let it be unlimited amount, then they could have really stress tested, and that would onboard a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. And this is where I definitely speculation. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they even do any more. Otherwise, it really is just like a one-time $6.5 million Super Bowl ad, which, hey, they raised 200 mil, some very, very smart people in the space, a lot of conviction. I'm not there, so I can't judge, at least to a degree. But they did force people who wanted to mint to connect their wallet. And if they really wanted to do that, they would have just removed that. And there's a lot of different tools, especially today and many more to come, that sort of remove all those barriers. You just put in your email, creates a wallet. So I'm encouraged to believe that they are aware of that product decision, and they intentionally did not, or they sort of gated it in a way for their Web3 native audience. But totally agree with you, Kyle, 100%.
If we play this out, where this scan to mint formula will really work is in gaming, where it's scan something to mint something for free, to mint a player in a game or an item in a game that is probably a semi-fungible token. It's probably an ERC 1155 as opposed to a 1 of 1, 721. You get that, and there's 100,000 of that particular item. But because you have that, you now own it. And by scanning, the journey tells you, hey, you own this item. And now because you own this item, you can play this game. And by playing this yada, 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 it could lead to you making money or to earn or whatever. And that's what Limit Break is testing. Is this the entry point to get? You came from mobile gaming, TPan. You want millions of users playing your game. What's the way to do that in Web3?
I totally agree in regards to better expanding user acquisition sort of tactics and strategies in that regards. And again, I go back to better understanding your user on a deeper level and building a stronger relationship there.
I just want to add one more thing. I think outside of games, though, there's also scan to mint a soulbound NFT is where I think this thing really takes off, because the reason you don't use the URL is because you can share the URL to others. Scanning means you actually have to be present there, pull out your phone and scan it. And so if you want a proof of location, proof of attending of an event, all these kind of things, the one problem with all our POAPs right now is like, it's a bitch to try to figure out how to get these in the right hands. But if you just use a scan feature, scan, and then boom, you get a POAP automatically in your wallet that proves you were at X event, X concert, X whatever. Well, now this is a perfect way to start bringing your audience on chain. And like you said, TPan, now you have all this other data to understand who your audience was that was driving on this highway, or that came to this conference, or that came to this concert, et cetera. And so I think it's these scan to mint a NFT that can't be traded is good, where you can like start to onboard the masses and gain some really, really cool data.
And that's a really, really great point from the soulbound aspect. And from a geolocation standpoint, yes, you can send URLs, you could even spoof your location. There are definitely layers that you can add to this, and we are simplifying the X to Y, scan to mint, or whatever you sort of fit into that formula. But on the back end, in terms of sort of the general framework, you could think about it as scan to mint. But then you would actually add on to that sort of formula that I'm talking about in regards to, okay, what are the supporting layers to validate qualification? From a security aspect, how do you sort of think about that? That's expanding down in regards to the other layers of enabling that campaign or that effort specifically, right? What are the requirements from a technical standpoint? What are the requirements or needs or wants from a security standpoint? What are the requirements from a targeting standpoint, and like where these pop up from a channel perspective? TV only, everyone's going to be at home supposedly when that comes up. Or travelers, right, at the airport, right? What does it mean to scan something, scan to mint, right? Or if it's a soulbound, let's say Amex Centurion Lounge, that's, you know, that I could see maybe something going on there as an example. I do want to talk about codes really quick, because this is definitely one of those examples of not many people know about it, but there's some very interesting things going on there in terms of scan to mint, or rather, you know, scanning as an interaction model. So basically, this is the project from a popular TikToker, 4 million followers. His name is Jason Klein. He got interested in the sort of Web3 NFT space for some time now. He actually doesn't have a lot of followers on Twitter, which is where oftentimes a lot of the Web3 and NFT action is. And he has created, you know, a project or two in the past, more sort of meme-esque or for fun. And this one as well, it's called Codes. However, the concept focuses on a QR code as the NFT. It was an open edition mint, sort of following that open edition meta. And I think 2,500 plus or minus of these QR codes were minted. And that's what it is, straight up a QR code. And when you scan the QR code, it takes you to a destination. What got really interesting very quickly is, one, as a content creator, Jason has created a lot of other interesting examples to prove his point of sort of one static image leading to infinite possibilities or infinite destinations. I would argue it's actually a dynamic image leading to infinite possibilities with the way I think about it. But basically, in the span of about a week, maybe a little over a week now, he has taken his scanners, particularly his holders, but it could technically be anyone that could scan it, right? This is public, it's on the blockchain, etc. He has taken users to $50 Starbucks gift card, right? Whoever redeems it first gets it, right? And that was public. People were complaining, you know, his holders were complaining. It has taken users to a token gated page. You had to hold 2 or more, a token gated page of like 10 gift cards, right? Chipotle, DoorDash, Starbucks, etc. And that was for holders, right? It wasn't publicly available. He has taken on Valentine's Day scanners and he updated the metadata for it to be like this sort of like heart framed QR code to Nat King Cole song, LOVE, right? L is the way you look at me, right? He took him scanners.
Keep going.
Yeah, I'm not like in singing mode. I'm just like talking and like talking really fast about all these examples, and then suddenly I'm trying to insert a singing example, but he took them to this YouTube video. But yesterday he took scanners to my Substack piece about codes. It gets very interesting when you think about scanning, and in the future he's made it very clear he wants it to be like you could scan and take the scanners to a landing page where you can mint something, right? Whether it's sort of an open mint or it's for token gated for holders. This is a very interesting interaction model where it's actually scanned to Y, where Y could be scanned to go to a landing page, scanned to receive a prize, scanned to read a piece of content or interact with a piece of content, or scanned to mint as well. But because it's a QR code, it gets extremely dynamic versus sort of single dimensional in regards to what that QR code is. I think that has some magic in it too when you think about it. If you're a brand, project in the space in regards to what QR codes can do. And his is, an NFT. The QR code itself doesn't have to be an NFT, but that's sort of an extension of an interesting concept in regards to the X to Mint framework.
My first thought there, I was like, Kai, we should write a piece about codes. Maybe he'll drive traffic to Web3 Academy. Okay, let's talk about text to mint and speak to mint, because these are two that I don't think most people have interacted with or heard of as much as the first two. And they're a little more, I think, fun, these examples. So tell us what has been done here, and then we can break them down.
Yes. So this text and speak to mint concepts came from an artist, a developer in the space named Pretty Blocks at PrettyBlocks. Just giving him credit. He's the creator on Twitter. And this sort of came more from the degen side, or like people who are very focused on finding interesting things and just hopefully buying and selling for a profit. And this was surfaced in one of the groups that I was a part of, and it was a text to mint functionality. The project was called Hacker Haiku. So you had to text a number, you could text that number anything you want, and that number would reply with a link to mint, the Hacker Haiku project. So pretty straightforward. You text a number to receive a link to mint that Hacker Haiku project. So it definitely sort of made its circles, it got a lot of interest, sort of slowed down. And what I thought was the first one and done, right? Cool concept. That was notable to me just because I personally hadn't really seen that before, although that has existed in other shapes and forms definitely in the past. This is not the first, but this is the first sort of fun one I've come across of and really seen minting en masse, hopefully for the folks that did participate, financial gain. And then I think about a week later, the same creator, Pretty Blocks, dropped another collection using Speak to Mint. And this collection was called Please Bro, right? So this is playing upon the culture in Web3, if you understand it. Pretty funny, actually. And this played off of the text to mint concept that was already created with Hacker Haikus. But in short, you actually had to speak and connect your mic to the website and recite and repeat this paragraph. And
I've got it up here.
You want to read it out? Okay.
Yeah. Please, bro, I really need to mint this project. I understand that this is just a fun art project. I understand that I am not entitled to gains. I accept any potential risks that come with trying to mint this project.
So for those that are familiar with the space, this plays upon a lot of the sort of activity in the space is one way to put it. A lot of the degeneracy, more specifically. So there's some memes incorporated in that and the culture. For those less familiar, to a degree, this is actually sort of like a disclaimer, for lack of a better word, right? Like this is just an art project. This is just for fun, in short. Right? There are risks involved because you might be paying a certain amount and you might be trying to expect something from that. But I think more, going back to the point of this is speak to mint, right? You had to actually allow microphone access. On the receiving end with what was created, they had to identify that you were saying the things that it wanted you to say. But what was fun as well, and this is like sort of connecting the dots here, is what gets minted is actually a product of the previous Hacker Haiku output. So basically, Pretty Blocks sort of mashed together elements of the text messages of the Hacker Haiku, and that was what was minted. So as an example, and there are definitely more, let's say, not safe for work versions of this, but the one that I sort of screenshotted in the piece was like, okay. And basically this piece that was minted from the Speak to Mint effort was, New York, you are hot. Boom, bad. Come on, bro, please, code, try, bruh, yo, gabba, something. So again, if you get it, you get it. And it's probably very confusing. But again, these are elements of what was texted in the first Hacker Haiku sort of mint project. So specifically, pretty blocks is connecting the dots here, but also making fun with the Speak to Mint Please Bro collection.
There's a couple things that I like with this. One, it actually gets rid of a lot of bots, I think, and people from like spammers trying to mint because they have to take a human. I mean, I guess you could probably code in a bot to text or to even speak now, but it's much harder. So I think that's really great. The other thing that's really cool about this is a lot of Web3, of course, it was one of your three things you said at the beginning is community. And especially in the NFT space, we have so many community-based NFTs. And what I can see with this Speak to Mint thing that's really interesting is if you're trying to build community, you typically have ethos around that community. And so rather than just letting anyone buy your NFT or, get your NFT, make them say the ethos first. Make them like get a bit of understanding. It's almost like when you minted the OP token for Optimism, they had you go through this like sort of something like a quiz where you had to like kind of go through these pages to read them. You had to answer correctly to show that you understood what these tokens meant and what it means to the Optimism community. And it was like a way to sort of rally the troops. And I feel like this kind of accomplishes a similar thing, which is actually a really cool engagement tool and even just a tool to keep the community more engaged and like keep them around, right? Retention tool is what I'm trying to say. I actually really like that. Then I also just thought of, as you said, that the Speak to Mint thing is, at what point does someone get married using Speak to Mint? When they say that I do, and then all of a sudden it mints the certificate?
On the chain.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, it's going to happen. I guarantee it.
Oh, no. I mean, definitely don't want to think about it, but if it doesn't work out, then what? But hey, just get married first on the chain. That's a different type of vow, right?
They could have sold an NFT so you could sell it.
There you go. Yeah. That's just more examples of interesting interaction models where, hey, like, again, we understand the concept of, playing a game. That's definitely a very large moment in the space. Then there was scanning, something that a lot of people, whether you're Web2, Web3, doesn't matter, understand that concept and just adding on like, well, you could scan to mint too. It takes you to a certain landing page or a minting page. And now this is getting a little further along where, how many examples of texting or speaking to mint are there? Very, very few, at least in terms of definitely zero in mainstream for now, right? And Kyle brings up a good point of how this sort of engages the community more. And other versions of that in different ways where, you can take quizzes, educate to mint, right? Like, or retention of information to mint. And there's a lot of different ways to validate that somewhat reliably, at least, right? And for those that really do care, they actually are happy that they got to mint the thing, but also they learned along the way. So lots of interesting takeaways. And the point here is there's so many interaction models. Another one that is starting to emerge in different ways, actually, in mainstream within Web3 and also in other unique ways. But pre-mint as an easy example, right? Instead of minting, but having a chance to mint more specifically, you might need to follow people on Twitter. You might need to like and retweet a tweet. You might need to have proof of funds to be allow listed to mint as an example, right? You need to have a minimum balance in a wallet. These are all sort of different ways to show interaction to get to that next step, whether it's minting or even before that or after that. So I think that's very important to think about, especially as you apply the sort of formula that allows you to realize, hey, it could be as simple as scan to mint, but it could be much more complex and modular in regards to the goals and the interactions that you want to implement in that type of journey that you provide.
Well, and I think that's where it gets really exciting to think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What businesses are often trying to do, or any organization, we're trying to get people to take an action to receive a result, whether it be purchasing a product or whether it be receiving a marriage license or whatever it might be. And when we have more people on chain with wallets in the metaverse completing different things, then, because you attended this event, well, now you can attend this event. Or because you completed this course or you learned this skill, now you can level up to this skill. And because of blockchain, we can immutably prove that you actually did the first step. So
Exactly.
you can move on to the second step. When you think about the interoperability of all this, it gets so exciting, and you can do it permissionlessly. So you want to invite a bunch of people to your event, well, you could pick which communities you want to invite to your event and just say, hey, these smart contract addresses, if you own one token within it, great, then you can access our event or you can access our mint. There's just so many layers that I think get so exciting down the road. TPan, I don't know if you think future forward like that.
Yes, I do. Actually, one that's very related to present and current events. So again, the war between Blur and OpenSea. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of smart folks have been talking about that this was going to happen for some time now, right? And now the question is, what is next? Specifically for creators, right? Because like this was a big reason as to, the ability to earn royalties in a pretty reliable way, at least what was initially thought. This is why they came to the space, right? And participated and created and got really excited. And now that a lot of that's been taken away, we're talking about, and what we've been talking more about is more sort of a very X to Y. Again, scan to mint, text to mint, even in pre-mint, hold a certain amount of crypto in your wallet to qualify, hopefully, for an allow list. And this is where I want to continue to emphasize where you can add layers to this. And again, understanding the framework and the formula is the first piece, but what you layer on gets very exciting. So why I brought up, I'm going back to the OpenSea sort of Blur situation, is you could hypothetically, and you could, again, if you have the right people and you think and you sort of build this in the right way, you could actually see, let's say, for those that you want to determine qualifications for an allow list, maybe you want to have filters for this needs to be an active wallet that has done a certain amount of activity in terms of purchasing and also selling NFTs on OpenSea or Blur or whatever marketplaces, and they have actually paid royalties. If they don't pay royalties, they don't get to participate in the next mint, in the next airdrop. They don't get an allow list for the next thing that this brand is partnering with another Web3 brand on. And then it turns into qualify to mint. And then what are the qualifications? The qualifications could be you need to also text, but also from a sort of like a history of interaction models that you've had, you need to have, had 90% or more of your selling transactions that have paid the actual royalty for whatever you're selling. Or maybe for a specific collection, all your transactions, if you were selling, they need to actually have paid royalties, for that collection to qualify for that next collection that's coming out. Art, digital collectible, whatever it is. So I think it's going to be very interesting when you think about that and expand about that in terms of the future in that regard. So excited to see a lot of the solutions. It definitely sucks today in that specific regard, but I think when you expand that forward thinking and also, hey, these are creators you're up against or like that are facing a problem. What are they going to do to solve the problem? They create. What else are they going to do? So that's sort of interesting to think about in terms of future formats of this.
100%. I totally agree. Okay, let's move on to a speed round. But before we do, TPan, want to give you a chance to give a little shill for your Substack and maybe your writing community. You have your own community, as you said before. The 3C is so important. Tell us a little bit about that and where people can find and follow you online.
Cool. Yeah. If you want to learn more about the work that I've done or just learn more about marketing and growth in Web3, check out my Substack. I write twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm starting to share this more as a fun fact, but I actually basically write live. So I do have a content calendar, very rough and lightweight on my side. When I do publish, I actually publish that live. It's definitely not normal. It's a happy accident when I talk about writing and doing that live, basically more or less. But TPan.substack.com. My Twitter is TPan, TPAN_Web3. Clearly, I'm bought in. My handle on Twitter has Web3 in it. So that's what it's focused on, at least for the medium long term for now. And yeah, I have a writing community called Write Web3. It's on Twitter at Write Web3. We're basically a group of writers in the Web3 space, diverse backgrounds, diverse ways of contributing to the Web3 space through writing. It's definitely a labor of love. I onboard every member manually, and we're about a group of 50 people strong. So that's really fun in regards to the energy, the diversity, and also just the different sort of ideas flying back and forth in regards to our content.
And what I think you said about Write Web3 is the line is, hate war, but we are at war with writing in the Web3 space.
Yes, for short, we call ourselves WW3. So we hate World War, don't want that, hope that never happens, but we're at war with poor writing in Web3.
Awesome. Quick speed round. Couple questions coming at you, TPan. What's an NFT you'll never sell?
So for those that know me online, I have a cool cat. Not super rare, nothing crazy. It has an apple head, has heart eyes. I wasn't actually thinking about it too much when I first got that and made that my profile picture online on Twitter in particular. also the mascot for sort of my Web3 with TPan publication. Would never sell it because it's part of my personal brand now, to be honest. I think there might be some edge cases where I would eventually change that if that ever were to happen. I would never say forever, I would say, but I would say that I would never sell that because that was my first instance of really understanding and having the light bulb moment of community on my side. I think Cool Cats is still today a very strong community. Not the highest for a price, would definitely admit that openly, but I think there's good vibes in short, and also just really good people that are part of that sort of community and brand.
Shout out. Yeah, Cool Cat's a great project. Okay, favorite person to follow on Twitter?
There are a couple of punks that I really like and follow, and they have epic content. I wouldn't be surprised if other people have shouted them out before. Punk 6529, legend in the space, started from his epic threads, and he's really good at analogies in terms of educating his audience. I mean, explaining concepts through analogies. I love doing that too. So he slowed down a little bit on that front, but has also contributed to the broader space through his open metaverse project and also his memes project and collection, collaborating with artists. So really big fan of sort of digital art, NFT art, crypto art. So patron of the arts on that front. And then Punk 9059, if I'm not mistaken, but NFT Statistics, Sam is his name. He's part of the Proof team, has an analytics background, and he just highlights a lot of interesting quantitative first, data first sort of insights about the space. So in his world, I think there's some parallels with that and what I do in my side, highlighting case studies on the growth side, frameworks. And for him, he points out a lot of the analytics of what's going on in the space and making insights and pointing them out to the broader community. So I'd say those two are really cool because of their more unique angles and how they've really built up an audience and really provided value to the broader space.
Big fans of both of them. Okay, last question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
So we actually did this before we started recording, but breathe, actually. It's not for Web3. It's not for, any particular goal, but it's important to just stop and breathe and consciously just be present. And I can always do better on that front. I think many of us can. Really just take note of where you are, who you are in that moment in time. And I think that's just such a simple message that we all need more of and need to do more of. So nothing to do with Web3, but I think we just need to breathe, stop and breathe.
I thought it was going to be a QR code, but all right.
No. And then with a QR code, and then to Web3 project or something.
With a QR code to mint a meditation that you have to prove that you completed in order to receive. Yeah, anyways.
Yeah, breathe to mint.
Couldn't agree more on that note. Thanks for listening today, everybody. Take a deep breath wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Hope you have a fabulous day. TPan, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.